Yasti, should I start?
Yes, please.
World Zarathustri Chamber of Commerce, Mumbai chapter, in its endeavor to provide opportunities to the World Zarathustri Chamber of Commerce members, has arranged a wonderful webinar today on the art infrastructure challenges and opportunities. In fact, today's webinar is more for the youth wing of the WZCC, and I feel that a lot of youth people should be taking interest in today's webinar. The World Zarathustri Chamber of Commerce even has a V wing, that is for Women Entrepreneurs Wing, and they are also doing their work and having meetings and webinars as and when time permits. In today's fast-paced and highly competitive world, current awareness is critical. It is important to stay abreast of the latest development that impacts your personal life, business, wealth, etc. The Indian art scene is going through a significant transition. Efforts are to broaden the art market in terms of artists as well as buyers. It has now generated interest because art has become a source for wealth creation. It is a venture to identify and discover value of art and utilizing every available platform to promote art and maintaining art collections with the designs to meet their aesthetic requirements. This thought-provoking webinar will be conducted by none other than Mr. Rishi Raj G. Sethi. He is a co-founder and director of Aura Art, India's leading integrated art house. They identify and promote artists of caliber, guiding family officers, collectors and corporates for building art collection, providing infrastructure solution for managing collections, assisting realty developers, hospitality players, and space designers with complete art solution. An important fact remains that today India is progressing in its economic field in a wonderful and a very fast pace. It is said by the world leaders that in another 10 to 15 years' time, India is going to be one of the foremost country in the world. The topics for discussion today by our Rishi Raj Ji: art as a tool for wealth creation and preservation, art trends inside and outside India, art industry framework, commercial and legal aspects, many managing collections. With this word, fellow viewers, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Rishi Rajji Sethi.
Out on the bigger picture, and it's very often helpful would do well to continue this culture of collection, which the is the voice clear now? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Are the slides visible now?
Yes.
Yes, lovely. Yes. So we will first dive into the global backdrop of the art market, and then come into the core subject of art infrastructure. Art, as you know, friends, is a wealth creator for the longest period of time. Uh, we have pristine examples of the Rothschild family, which probably is one of the wealthiest families in the world, may not come in the top 5, 10 rankings every day, simply because many of their businesses are unlisted, but it's the gold standard of wealth management, has been allocating 1/3 of their wealth towards art for the last 150 years. Deutsche Bank, an aggressive bank, and as you know, a bank is accountable for any dollar invested in the balance sheet, has built a formidable collection of 50 to 60,000 artworks, and at the same time has supported various initiatives. A British Rail Pension Fund, as you know, pension funds are the most conservative in asset allocation, has allocated funds towards art for a long period of time and beaten the market. The World Wealth Report, which is like again a Bible for the wealth management space, has been creating this concept of investments for passion. Their whole logic is, if you look at the graph on the bottom left, is that as Asian economies or any economy moves from a subjugation culture, which is more a saving culture, to a start of money, and then migrates to a show off culture, there is a significant preponderance towards personal assets, assets that mean personally a lot to the collector, besides simply being financial assets. Which simply put, as we see the earlier generation, which was looking at more saving and leaving a strong balance sheet for next generations, with the current generation, there's a larger propensity to spend the current income and sometimes even beyond, with the greater certainty of an increasing wealth flow in the future. A lot of shift happens in the allocations of assets. And from your traditional assets, a lot more capital goes to alternate assets. Alternate assets obviously is your early stage investments, venture capital, private equity. Then comes your luxury, real estate, gold, art, wine, many of the other investments for passion get a lot of that share. And art is the largest part of the investment for passion. And as we know, the shift of GDP is happening now towards the Asian economies, and India is, as we discussed, getting more prominent in the global scene. Very interesting. So when we are obviously discussing art, and we'll consistently refer to paintings and sculptures as instances in this presentation, but we must bear in mind that the discussion as well applies to all the collectibles in the bucket, whether it's vintage cars, coins, stamps, antique furniture, other antiquities, uh, you know, uh, porcelain, Chinese porcelain that many of us may have in our homes, to many such other pieces of heritage. And again, if we see what is the potential and how India can actually improve there, is very visible when one looks at the treasure map of the world. And obviously, I will continue an India-China comparable, simply because, as we know, it's a being very strong Asian economies and the future of the world. And there is a lag of many trends that have developed in China, which are moving to India. And if you look at this treasure map again, 17% of the wealth of Chinese HNIs and ultra HNIs is already in treasures. And mind you, the largest treasure is fine art, followed by precious jewelry, and some other collectibles, precious metals. Whereas in India, it's still only 3% of the overall allocation. Within that, again, as we know, jewelry rules the roost, and followed by classic automobiles and furniture. So art is not in the first three bucket of Indians, and we only 3% of our wealth and treasure, and that can easily expand by 3 to 5 times in the next 5-10 years, based on the factors we discussed earlier. Very simplistic comparison again. I will limit the focus to art versus jewelry in India, because as you see in the bottom right graph first, Indians have 100% allocation to jewelry, the only country in the world, at every income strata, wealth strata. And the interesting part is, if you look at the left and the center graph, what it suggests is that jewelry incidentally has a diminishing margin utility beyond a point in terms of allocation. Obviously, the love for jewelry will never go, but in terms of allocation, after an HNI has acquired or invested significantly in jewelry, the propensity to buy much more reduces. Whereas art actually follows a reverse construct, where even after building of initial collection, which may just be filling up walls, the propensity to collect only expands, and love for art actually takes off. And the allocations in terms of quantum and percentage significantly expand with time. That's a very interesting trend. And even for the purpose of displaying wealth to the world, as well as bequeathing wealth, art is a preferred vehicle that comes out from these statistics. Very interestingly, we may look at, that, we've just gone through a big upheaval, this pandemic, obviously a health upheaval, which has also created an economic shock. And how will that impact art? So we tried to analyze how was the impact on the art market in significant upheavals that the world has seen in the last century. And mind you, what helps this analysis is that there is an art index, the Mimosas Art Index, which is established in 2000, but actually tracks data right from 1875. So we have a nearly 150-year-old art index available to us to map trends in the world, and the S&P 500 again is nearly 100-year-old. So you can do very interesting correlation regression analysis, and that analysis, when performed by some global players, shows up this very interesting pattern, that in all the world wars, which were again economic shocks, art recovered the fastest. And just taking some example, the World War I, for example, if the art index from 100 ended at 125, the equity indices fell down to 75 and ended at 94. The Vietnam War is a completely bizarre example, where the equity indices from 100 fell to 73, whereas art index went up from 100 to 356. So we have consistent divergence, and we were obviously quite perplexed when we saw this data. And then we understood the logic by looking at the factors as to how the world views art, and not necessarily how only we view art at this stage of our development. And what we figured is that the world views art as family silver, particularly Europeans, who have been the oldest collectors and having the largest allocations towards art. The way we look at gold as a defensive asset is what the world looks at art. And what are the characteristics, again, that sort of define such type of behavior, is the fact that, so what is so interesting in gold vis-a-vis other assets, is that it derives its value from a price that is determined by the London Metal Exchange. So, let's look at an example of any particular economy. Let's say Greece had a shock a few years back, the Greece economy. When the local economy suffers, equity, realty, many other assets that derive value from local cash flows become quite valueless. Whereas gold, because it's transportable and carries the same value for the particular carat in the international market, retains its value. Likewise, in art, a $10 million Picasso sitting with a collector in Athens can actually be transported to London, New York, Hong Kong, and auctioned at $10 million. So there is no value loss for that work having stayed in Greece, which is a loss that many other assets locally may actually suffer. Interestingly, looking at how the global art share has changed over the last 10 to 12 years. One of the first articles, friends, I wrote on art was in 2006 when I visited Hong Kong and saw the early trends in the Chinese art market, which were very, very strong. And also, Chinese art, I must admit, is very, very interesting. And I wrote an article that time that, and China, mind you, was 6% of global art market that time. India was like a 0.5, 0.3% admissible. And the US was a good 46% of the global art market. So, you know, there was a very big gap between US and China. And I wrote an article that in 10 years, possibly, China could overtake US, which seemed like a very implausible proposition. Mind you, but 5 years later, much before anybody could predict, Chinese art market was 30% of the global art market, and the US had corrected to 29. Obviously, what hastened this whole shift in market share was partly the Lehman bust that happened in 2008, which had a asymmetric hit on the US market vis-a-vis some of the other markets. But even now, in the long run, China still stands at respectable 20% of the global art market. US has bounced back to 42%, recovered its lost ground. But point is, we as India is still 0.3%. So China again gives us a direction that if in 5 years a country can catch so much market share, even if India were to aspire to move from 0.3 to 3%, it's a 10 times growth in the market, which is a very astounding number. If you were to look at some of the how much of the art market is supported by millionaires, just as a proxy, India has 3% millionaires. That's why we're aspiring for 3% of the art market. But let's look at the ratios. What we're trying to suggest here is that every percentage of millionaire is supposed to support 1% in the art market, just as a very broad proxy. So we are seeing, 42% of the art market in the US is supported by 51% millionaires, which is a 0.82 ratio, very balanced. Anything around 1 supports our logic. China is again very balanced, nearly 20% of the art market supported by 15% millionaires. So 1.33, a tad aggressive, but exactly in line with our 1 ratio. UK is very, very skewed. 20% of the art market supported by 2% millionaires, but UK has its own challenges and different dimensions with a lot of global wealth sitting there. India again is very, very poor in that ratio at 0.11%, which means 3% millionaires only support 0.33% of the art world. Some of these data points I would love you to read from the report that is there, this art trends report that we wrote in April 2020. So I will skim some of these because we want to discuss the art infrastructure part more. Again, what is equally important to understand is the socio-economic political shift that India is witnessing in the global order. And many statistics, whether it's the relevance of values of the Indian entertainment industry to our sport industry, to various factors, suggest that we are now in many ways a double digit, having 10-20% sort of share of the world and China in many statistics. Whereas in art, we are still sub 1% or just a tad over 1% now, with a Gaitonde selling at 40 crores, which is 5.5 million. We are still a little over 1% of the $450 million that the Da Vinci Salvador Mundi fetched 3 years back. So, again, we see a huge headroom for growth for the Indian art market, all factors being equal. Obviously, the disproportionate growth in wealth in India will only aid this whole growth. And, very simple factors, the amount of museums, as I mentioned, we've had a great history where the TIFR collection is like, the whole building is like a museum. In Colaba, you have some museums like the Prince of Wales Museum, autonomous in Bombay, to some other museums, and you have a lovely Jahangir Nicholson collection bequeathed to the museum, the Prince of Wales Museum, as you would have seen. So there are some initiatives in India, no doubt, but very few and far between. Probably we've added 5 to 10 private museums in the last 10 years, and maybe a few in the last 50 years on the government side. China added 5,000 museums in the last 10 years, and the world has an overall stock of 55,000 museums. So again, we have a huge headroom to grow there. Just to take an example, Louvre as one museum has 10 million visitors, which is equal to the entire tourists in the country a few years back. So you can imagine how much contribution the new museums will make, not only to a lot of art being collected to fill up those museums, but more importantly, to create a whole culture of collection in the economy, as well as to attract international tourists and domestic tourists as well to see that art. So we looked at the macroeconomic view towards art as to why the global art market stands where it is. And a headline number which I skipped was that the global art market is a $65 billion trade, which means nearly 5 lakh crore of art changes hands every year. It's a very large number, friends. And India still at 1,500 crore is a very, very small fraction. So we looked at why there is headroom for Indian art to grow. And we looked at a closer neighbor, China, showing that path in the last 10 years to us, and how with the socio-economic political shift towards India over the last few years, and projected to be, this is projected to be India's decade, how art will benefit from that. Coming then to as to how is art valued, how should one participate in art? We are not getting very granular in this session to look at which art to buy and looking at art appreciation, because that's like a a whole day discussion of its own. But we are just trying to leave some thoughts as to that the art market has a very strong scientific basis in which an artist gets valued. That scientific basis very often is not visible to a first timer or somebody who's viewing the art world from the outside, who looks at oscillating prices in auctions and also in gallery shows. But if you try to understand the method in the madness, there is some construct in the art market that it follows. The most fundamental construct I would like to leave behind is that the artist gets valued and not the artwork. So this is very, very important to carry in mind, that it's not a painting that you hit across and you fall in love with it and you say you want to buy it, and therefore you can obviously buy something which you like for filling up a wall. But if you're looking at wealth creation, you have to go deep into understanding how will that artist grow in times to come. And we've now trying to study here what are the factors that contribute to the growth. Art valuation, because it's subject later important for our discussion, the art infrastructure, I'll touch upon that. How is art valued? There are two concepts here, art appraisal and art valuation. Appraisal is a more bottom-up approach where you fundamentally look at the aesthetic value of that artist and that artwork, trying to understand how important artist is in the piece of history, etc. Factors which you'll see right now. And it's a very obviously complicated and long-drawn task, and obviously economically expensive and time-consuming. Whereas valuation, which is what is more commonly done in trade for insurance, for tax planning, for estate planning, is a more benchmarking study where we actually start with a comparable and then adjust that comparable for various attributes. So I will just take quickly a real estate example. We are not trying to do an IPC, a bottom-up study of demographics of Bombay or BKC and all to value, let's say, one office in one BKC. But we are seeing, okay, what is the BKC values? What is the capital transacting at? What is Godrej One transacting at? And if these are the different attributes for this building, how much will you adjust to get to the per square feet value for that project? So it's a trade comparable plus adjustment model that we follow for valuation. Coming back to the appraisal method, which is the grounds up method, or the intrinsic value of art, how does that get valued? Is the artistic value, let me go to the next slide and come back to this. It's the artistic value, the intrinsic value, which is the growth, the change in the value driven by the artist deepening in his practice, deepening in his aesthetics, building his own signature style, and funneling his creativity in the right direction. And then there's a premium created through promotion, through that's a social engagement of the art. How much the art means to the world, what piece of history that art will carry when we look at the world 10, 20, 50 years later, when we step back and look at it. And then there is a lot of commercial relation of the value, which is the price discovery in auction and concept shows. Looking at the same color coding, let's step back now to the prior slide. So what we discussed quickly was artistic value plus social cultural value plus commercial value, building up the value of an artwork, an artist really. And very simply put, we made an equation that the value of art is sum of these three factors to the power of artist brand. So as I said initially, promotion and the branding will create significant value, which and the composition of the commercial value over time, the artist brand escalation is very large. So it may be misleading, but for example, to say that is a Sabawala at 1 crore is cheap or expensive, I would say it's cheap because he has a great piece of Indian history. He's a cubist master. Supply is limited, and works are in great collections, and it's not going to come to market in a hurry. So I'm just trying to give you an example of how the market will assess quality of the artist, demand supply factors, social positioning of the artist, place in the art world, and then value. Tomorrow from 1 crore to 10 crore is then a function of pure economics. But the fact that he should be a front runner in the art world is a given based on various qualitative factors. Again, looking at just headline numbers, Indian art has sold, as I mentioned, at Gaitonde at 40 crore a few months back in the middle of the lockdown, and which looks like a fancy number if you look at the overall art market in India. Still a far cry from the 140 crore plus that Chinese art has already achieved, and the near 3,000 crore that international art has achieved. So you can see the huge headline, the heads up that we have in terms of growth. And obviously, I'm not getting too much into qualitative analysis right now, but some thoughts to carry back is obviously that many of the artists in India and China are from the 20th century, whereas world over they are from the 14th, 15th century. That explains some of the gap in values over time. Indian artists will, over many waves of promotion, those, let's say, Da Vinci has had 500 years of promotion in that sense, and Indian artists have had just 30 years of promotion because they were still building up their career till the end of the 21st century. So in that sense, there's a huge headroom for growth that is still there, and the gap is justified in that sense. Sculptures, again, a very interesting category. We've had sculptures selling up to 10 crores in India, and again at 650 crore outside India. You see a huge gap there, and a very interesting, the Geosmati sculpture, example of wealth creation. Commerce Bank had bought this sculpture many years back at probably a few $1,000s, and I think 40-50 years later they sold it at a single shot $100 million, $101 million. So that went on record as one of the largest stories of wealth creation in a single asset by a bank. The new highs line, I will request you to refer to the Art Trends report that is available on our site, which explains this. But very quickly, 3 parts in this. The first part is we've tried to map here what defines the growth of the market. Because there are no indices in India, as I said, globally the indices in India there's not at this point. So what we took is as a statistic was the highest price achieved by any piece of art in India and rest of the world defines the level of the index according to us at a very crude thumb rule. But that's interesting because as you can imagine, with the first time a painting hits a crore or 5 crores or 10 crores, it creates a ramification and it has a bearing on the market and the next bidder. So globally, we see a very smooth 10% CAGR over 56 years for the first painting to sell at $1 million a Rembrandt in 61 to the Da Vinci selling at 450 million in 2017. You see a 10% CAGR. Indian art, you see a very interesting 24% CAGR over 28 years for the first Amrita share guild to auction internationally in 1992 at 10 lakhs. Indian auction started closer to 97-98. And for the last Gaitonde to auction at 40 crores, you have a 24% CAGR over 28 years. Very interesting. The second part of the graph, the multicolor bands you'll see, actually suggests that there is a very significant underbelly in the art world in terms of slicing and dicing it based on various thematic plays. So the art market is not one monolith that the art market grows and falls at the same time. There are regional masters, there are quality works of top masters, there are contemporary artists, and there are emerging artists. All of them are having a different trajectory, and that's a longer discussion at some point, which you can have. And lastly, very interestingly, key developments. I would just like to touch upon one aspect for people looking at art from a distance. Again, you've seen the art funds came 10 years back and did not do well. So very often that's a question of, has the art market not done well in the last 10 years? Answer is no. The art market, as I showed you, has grown. The highest price painting in 2008 was 5 crores. Today it's 40 crores. So clearly there's headline growth. Whereas the art funds, for various reasons, could not cash on the opportunity. Also, probably timing, because 2008 they were 7, 8 they were raised just before the Lehman collapse, and many other factors. The short window that they had to promote and to exit created these challenges. But I think fundamentally the gap was also that I think India entered into the financialization of art too soon. If you look at globally, Sotheby's Christie's were formed in 1744, 1766. The first art fund, British Rail Pension Fund, came 1970. So you had a 225 years later. India, first auction happens in India 1997, the first art fund in 2005. It beats me as to how the Indian art market can mature in 7 years, what takes the world 200 years to mature. So clearly there were other curing issues there which needed to be addressed. Our whole submission is to look at this as a great opportunity to buy what you love and within what you like, to identify where there's greater growth potential and to enjoy that art and watch it grow than simply paperize the art and do funds and other instruments on the art for the time being. 10, 20 years later, when there's a very deep secondary market and a lot more trade is possible, we can look at some of those techniques. Very simply put, again, growth rates. I will not spend too much time, but we've plotted here the same work of art selling at multiple times to show growth rate of that artwork, and all are stunning numbers. But what is interesting is, if you look at a Picasso selling at $155 million or a William de Kooning, at those high numbers of 60 million, 155 million, it is the best of hedge fund managers, Stephen Cohen, and before that, Steve Wynn, who are buying art at these 50, 100, $200 million. These are the most astute investors in the world who build, great capital in their other asset classes and have deploying it here now. And they are the ones who are betting here. And then you have great examples of an Akbar and a Taib Mehta also reselling at high growth rates. I'll jump this part very simply. This is more for the wealth management industry. Data points that suggest that adding art to a portfolio very simply is a great diversification tool because it has a low correlation to other asset classes. Interesting now, coming to the second most important part of our discussion now, the art infrastructure solution. The backdrop of the art wealth was important to get here. There are various factors and parameters that guide and change from a collector in various stages of the collection journey. So in the initial stage of wealth creation and allocation towards art, acquiring art, guidance on what to acquire is most important. As we move to the next stage, managing that collection, putting the house in order is most important, and we'll discuss that in a bit. And then at the next stage, how do you transfer that wealth to the next generation in an effective manner becomes more important. And but over time, the trend is that family offices and wealth managers globally are now expected to mirror and manage the art book like other assets that they manage. And therefore, the need for having very solid infrastructure solutions in the economy, a term that we are proud to have created. What does it mean here is, how do you document the collection? Sounds very simple, but you have to understand a collector who's inherited art and then built a collection over 30, 40, 50 years, and the collection is now in double digits or hundreds and thousands. It's very difficult to take stock at one point in time, to draw an inventory. There was no reason in the past to document the art. That's very important. The tax in consideration becomes important here. There was no wealth tax in art. Capital gains came in art in 2008. GST and indirect taxes came at the same time, which means that for the longest period, the art collection did not require to have any documentary trail. A few years back, the income tax form has not been amended, and this is an important consideration to carry for those who may have overlooked it. That if your income is more than 50 lakhs, the ITR form now requires you to disclose even the cost of your paintings, sculptures that you have owned historically, which is the first time now that the law requires you to file static collection of art as well. Besides the transaction of art, obviously, which will get reported on a sale when you're paying capital gains tax, but even the mere ownership of art now needs to be recorded in the return. So there's a greater need, therefore, to look at valuing your collection. Obviously, insurance is an important need as we move around and art gets moved around, and there are risks of fire, theft, etc., that keep arising. The need to have a solid cover is important. More interestingly, the rates have come down significantly, and insurance is much more affordable and much more easier. Conservation restoration, we'll discuss, is an important area. We've covered quickly the risks of a collection. documenting a collection is quite straitjacketed in terms of process. It's just the effort of doing it actually required. And then we've also built an online tool actually to help collectors to migrate the collection online. Valuation, as I discussed, is much easier now for the sake of regulation as well as for insurance. And many good insurance companies from Tata AIG to Bajaj to IFFCO Tokyo are offering products from the art world, including ICICI Lombard. Tagging is an important area to secure the physical part of the art, as you loan art to collection, to shows or to friends or other reasons. How to make sure that the same piece of art, the veracity is maintained. Tagging and also helps in inventarization is a good solution that again is developed now. Restoration, very important area. Very often we have art in our homes, which is old, and it probably is not having the same sheen as it had in the past. There is a layer of dust, there's fungus, and other sometimes cracks that need to be consolidated. And more often than not, we've seen is, when we take that art to market straight away, it may fetch a much lower value. Our advice is to actually take stock to get that art restored, conserved, and then take it to market. The value unlocking will be much higher. Even otherwise, a good conservation will actually extend the life of the art for the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years. So it's good to sort of take stock at one point, get a appraisal done, a condition report done by a restorer to look at any damages that need to be addressed. It's like healthcare. The earlier you address an issue, the easier it is and less painful and less expensive. The later we do it, obviously costs and effort compounds. And there are many other solutions that are coming to shape to store art outside India, to look at trust structure, to look at various ways in which you can safeguard even antiques. For example, there are solutions like glass casing available. Godrej has come up with. There's an international company also doing that. You can climate control the object at a molecular, at a very micro level, and not having to control the environment of the whole room. Having said that, art typically, if put on the walls, doesn't need much climate control. A room that is well aired is good. Typically, you have to maintain average humidity of 52 to 55 degrees and average temperature of 24, 25 degrees is good for art. It doesn't need air conditioning. Air conditioning helps, obviously, in any case, it sucks out part of the moisture. At the same time, we should avoid very drastic changes in humidity and temperature, which means, it's hot outside, you keep 18 degrees and suddenly you shut the AC and open the window, and there's a 10% shift in temperature, which again has a larger spike in humidity. All those factors should be controlled. Other than that, managing art on the wall is not a challenge. Art in storage is much more challenging as humidity and other challenges build, including rodent attack, including other things. Then to look at a climate controlled storage is much better than to store it in a garage or some other place. This is more for corporates. Again, archival facilities is the need of the hour, from history mapping as well as managing the collections. Obviously, giving is an important part of the community activity, and in art, conservation restoration is very good as a solution, as a way to help the community, as well as to manage the entire art. So, right from the objects and collectibles in fire temples to old homes and havelis, there'll be a lot of heritage that is not being well maintained. Which maintaining that also is a great act of noble kindness and also a business activity for someone to take on. I'd love you to sort of pick up the report that we've done with Ernst & Young on the tax considerations for collectors, and also a lovely report we've done with Mr. Jamshed Mistry, founder of International Legal Alliance, on the intellectual property around art. Again, as you can imagine, there are challenges of understanding whether there's a violation of intellectual property, how are prints done, very big issue of authenticity and fakes. Especially when you're buying masters from the secondary market, whether it be auctions or otherwise, they have to do a very deep dive into the authenticity and provenance, because as we discussed, a large part of the art is under documented in India because there was no regulatory framework requiring documentation. So best of works and not the best of works in terms of provenance both suffer the same fate of having a poor trail, and therefore all the more need for collections to be well managed, for collectors to take legal inputs before you make an expensive purchase. An area which I'll touch upon in a minute. It's of great interest now, and before we get to question, it's not something that we subscribe to or we understand, to be honest. We're still old school for that. But NFT art is a big wave that's come out. with this Beeple as an artist, Mike, whose works has sold has at $69 million. It's a lovely work which actually is sort of form of digital art. Our whole submission there is tokenization, NFT, blockchain, buzzwords, but basically they create a great solution for having the ability to trace the authenticity and provenance of the digital art. And from that, if they are very effective, blockchain is a great solution again to be deployed in the art world, in the physical art world, to be able to create some sort of a mapping of the changes of art ownership, which will help the art market a lot. But we are seeing a platform is only as good as the underlying. Is digital art very hot in India? Probably not. Will this platform enable digital art to become more relevant? Yes, and then the markets can find their own level. I will leave it here in a minute more. I'll sum it up and then be available for questions. Again, quickly to step back, art is a great wealth creator. Knowing what to collect is equally important, and what entry values and why it will grow. Obviously, you can build your own frameworks, seek guidance to build that framework. Buying from the sake of buying what you like with some advice is the best way to do it and enjoy that art and see it grow. Managing the art is not that challenging unless it's a very old collection and large, in which case art infrastructure is a great area. And art infrastructure, we believe, is also a great opportunity for new businesses to come in. And that's where I want to step back again and look at broadening this discussion, not only to art. As I mentioned earlier, all of these frameworks, whether it is documenting, valuing, insuring, restoring, are equally relevant, if not more, to every collectible, which is again coins, stamps, vintage cards, wine collections, antique furniture, antique jewelry. All these collectibles suffer from the same issues, and there's an opportunity to create a great platform or sub platforms to manage all of these assets in a more systemic manner. As the economy improves and wealth gets improved, cultural assets will get valued better. The past cultural assets also will get recognized for their value, and future cultural assets will also, as they appreciate in value, get greater recognition. As I mentioned, the global art market is $65 billion, 5 lakh crores. And a headline number again, the value of art and collectibles in collectors' homes is $3 trillion, which is a mind-blowing number again. And if you take that same proportion to Indian art, probably we have 50 to 70,000 crore of wealth sitting in all art and collectibles in people's homes, offices, museums, godowns, factories, galleries, auction houses. So a large addressable market for solutions to come. It is important for all members of the fraternity to come together, for chartered accountants, for lawyers, for insurance companies, for warehouse companies, for logistics companies, for art valuers, for art advisors, for galleries, for auction houses. All of them have to come together to actually build this framework so that collectors have a gratifying journey in building the collection, in maintaining it, and in exiting it. Happy collection journey. I'm available for questions, please. These reports, sorry, I forgot to mention, these reports that are available at artinfrasolutions.com, which is the service site, and the art that we promote and other activities are available at aura.in. And again, as I'm available on this mail and number, WhatsApp and phone to take any discussion forward. Yes, should we look at the chat? Any questions? Yes. So, what is your advice to today's youth to take up art as a career? So, this is a broad question again. When you say taking art as a career, it's there's different parts. One is being an artist. You should be an artist if you're really passionate about the subject, and no market framework is important to go you further. But it's a long journey for an artist to build a career. That is something that you have to understand. And obviously, if you're good, it's very rewarding. If you're not, there's a struggle like in every other field. As a business, it's very interesting. The dealing in art is one part of it, as we discussed. and maintaining art collections and art infrastructure are two different businesses that not necessarily do not coexist, at different skill sets required for both. And as we know that the wealth creation will grow, the interest in art will grow, there is a need for many more players to be in both these buckets. The art infra need has a more urgent need, and the dealing obviously has a need. And as international interest in art grows, we've not even scraped the tip of the iceberg. We have large family offices globally that have, like $1 billion exposure to art or $10 billion exposure to art. And when they start allocating to Indian market, imagine they'll allocate like 10 million, 100 million. Incidentally, it's very funny that sometimes when we spoke to some of the family offices earlier, they said we're not looking at Indian art because it's too cheap. It has to reach a particular amount of value before international money in a large way can come. When we were at like $1 million, imagine somebody selling a Picasso at 100 million cannot buy 1,000 works of Indian artists. It's not easy to physically manage an art collection. So many of the international families are waiting still for Indian art to become expensive enough to justify an allocation, and for India to become important enough socially, economically, politically. I think all of that is happening now at a very fast pace. And with that, we will see a lot of global capital coming, and there's a need to manage that into some international NRIs to collect art and international buyers. I'm an artist from Zareen, and most of my work is commissioned. What right do I have on my art once it is sold, delivered? Are all my rights relinquished once art is sent to the buyer? I am not a legal expert. We've done this report with Mr. Mistry. I would request if you can add something to this, but from my understanding of the report, is that all these, unless expressly written otherwise, the artist is the owner of the copyright in the work. When you sell a work, normally, I'm not talking about commissioning right now. When you normally sell an artwork, all the rights actually remain with you, and the buyer only gets the right to enjoy that particular work. Commissioning is more tricky. Unfortunately, in India, we don't have lengthy contracts. But in commissioning, if I, as a client, were to get something commissioned by an artist, I would say my expectation is that in commissioning, there are two types of commissioning now. One is where the creative input is mine as a buyer, or as a gallery platform. I've thought of an idea and I've come to an artist to execute it, and I have a buyer in mind for that. So the artist is just executing a task, and there's no IP of the artist. IP here is not a task of executing. You'll appreciate. IP is the task of thinking through what is to create. And if that input is only from the buyer, then there is no IP with the artist in any case. And by expectation, the buyer would think that he has all the rights, but it's important to have it documented legally. If it's your idea per se, I'm taking a separate example now, that you habitually do horses, like this painting behind, for example, and somebody says, I love this painting, this is 4 feet by 8 feet, I want a similar work in 4 feet by 6 feet. Then it's very different. The commissioning here is only a function of change in size. The idea is yours, you're habitually doing this, and therefore I would think much higher chance that the IP lies with you. Important not to leave these issues under the carpet, but bring it up, take inputs and get them into the contract. Otherwise, there will only be a challenge later in terms of expectation management. I will go to the next chat. What is the best way to store, treat an old painting on cloths? Oh, sorry, I missed the other question from Zareen. Can the buyer reduplicate it and sell the duplication? So if the rights in the copyright remain with you, only you can reduplicate and sell duplications. The buyer cannot. If the rights in the copyright move to the buyer, obviously then he has all the rights that you had and he can do all of this. Percy, what is the best way to store, treat an old painting on cloth? So an old painting on cloth, I would just, even canvas is a cloth in some sense. Best way to store, as I said, if it's on the wall, it's the easiest to manage. If it's in storage, then you just have to make sure that there's no buildup of humidity in that environment. So very often, and even in the packing, you should let basically the principle is that the work breathes. And if the environment around it is not static, environment also breathes, you're good. If the work is either shrink wrapped and put into a vacuum container or plastic, then it's great. If it's otherwise loosely packed, but pretty much airtight and the air inside cannot circulate, and it's put into a cupboard or a garage, again the air is not circulating, then you have all the risks compounding. So as long as it's put into a situation where the environment, local environment and the larger environment is breathing, shifting, circulating, it's fine. Moment you create stagnation is when the problem comes with the artwork. Obviously, much more specific inputs can be sought from restorers and conservators. Thank you for very several. Thank you, Razmin. I must thank you for your article on the Parsi community's love affair with art in the Parsi Times few years back. That really helped me a lot to prepare. I would love if you can also add something here if the host can unmute you. Have you your other point? I'll come to. I'll come to Behrone's question later. The other point from Razmin is the huge sums of money that art attracts is typically limited to works of masters or established artists. What advice would you give to those looking to start a collection to find works of emerging artists that have scope for appreciation? Very relevant question. So it's important to understand that how early in the life cycle of the art are we collecting from a growth point of view. Let's take an equity example now. Your masters here, your top masters are like a listed A group companies, which are value is significantly unlocked by the market. And there's growth potential still, but there's no bargain available anymore. Then there's a pre-IPO, which is companies large and just waiting to list and create a secondary market, and there's normally a valuation growth. Then there's mezzanine, then there's the early stage, seed stage. In the art world now, if you want to look at seed stage, means a fresher from JJ coming out and you're betting on him, your path to your fruition is very long, basically, and therefore your risk is higher and your growth journey is higher. But what do you still bet on is you bet on the artist. You bet on his ability to create a great work of art today. And what's a great work of art? That great of art work is never static. That great work of art is something that communicates to you at one level today. And as you grow, it communicates to you at a different level few years later. So that forward call you have to have, that is this work of art great? Then an artist again has to have a dynamism that he's creating a particular set of great works today, and he will intuitively grow in his quality and his thinking over time. It's the thought process that you're paying for of an artist, not the execution. So over time, you have to see that gravitas in an artist, that he will improve in his quality and subject. And the most important part for any asset or for any product or brand is promotion. Who will promote him and how well will he get promoted? So now when you say, is it easy for you to answer all these questions in a fresher artist? Probably difficult. You're taking a bigger punt. Then what should you do? Do you necessarily then look at emerging art as buying for the love of it and a pot shot? Therefore, as we also mature as an art promotion house, we like to encourage allocations in mid-career artists, where the work of art is already cemented, where we know that there is a greater, if you look at the commercial world, the term is used too big to fail, where the artist cannot now evaporate into thin air. He cannot defocus. He's already built a sizable name and a reputation and a following. It's a matter of how fast he can grow. And therefore, we look at the concept of regional masters, which is, is that artist having a fine following in a community that makes a very strong bias towards an artist. So let's take a Vaikuntham, for example, or a Vrindavan Solanki we love, from whether it's Ahmedabad, Gujarat, representing Saurashtra Men and Women in a beautiful form, to a Vaikuntham representing Andhra Men and Women in a beautiful form. What does that mean is everybody from the community, from that region in the world will want one of those works in their wall, and that's a great driver for growth. So you have to look at factors you're betting on, which will create that stickiness for that artist to grow. And long answer short, emerging, if you can answer some of the questions I've raised, great, you got a winner on your hand and you entered him early, it's a jackpot. As we look at systematically advising, it's very difficult to enter very early artists and create that sustainable advantage and growth. We look at mid-career artists who are already established, but their branding is still to grow, and that branding will create the growth. If I may just look at some of the other questions. Thank you for information. So the question is, have you experienced any incident about stolen art in India? An interesting story to tell, any interesting episodes? I mean, these interesting episodes are quite tricky, so I would rather in a public platform avoid discussing. But there are plenty of cases, right? And we know some of cases right in who've hit headlines. which means that from the family there have been cases where art has been probably reportedly changed. We know cases recently where somebody in the family without the consult of the elders has sold the art. So litigations around art are just going to explode, because you have to understand it's a movable asset which has significant value, where the value has been discovered recently. In the past it was not, and it is not recorded in the books. So I'll give you a classic recipe for disaster. When we've gone through succession plans with many trust companies and wealth managers who are doing a great job otherwise, and we say, okay, on the art, what has the family done? And very often the situation is they've not even given us a list. And what's happened, these are live situations now, that somebody is broken the family's assets beautifully, and one son gets a flat in Malabar Hill, one gets in Colaba, and all other assets are beautifully broken to the T and squared off, with some payouts. And you just forget about the art because nobody's thought of it. And one home has two Hussains and one home has two Ramkumars. So suddenly this home has 5 crore worth of art and this home has 1 crore worth of art. And then there have been disputes in the family. 5 years later, they've come to us, to the lawyers, what do we do? And we've then revalued the arts and told them to settle the cash, difference in cash, through payouts. So the point is that, so this is a classic problem, right? An asset not sitting in the books. You're not told your C about it, not told a wealth manager about it, you're not told a lawyer about it. It's just sitting on the wall. You're just seeing it as a child grow, and you've not valued it. And suddenly you have these disconnects between families when separations happen for good and bad reasons. And we've known cases of people have sold off great art to dealers, like in Chor Bazaar, selling off a $1 million painting at $100. These are stories that have happened just because you didn't know the value of the art. Or sometimes it needed some restoration, and somebody said, it's lost 70% value now, it's gone. Give it to me, and you've given it off. Not realizing that with that, just 5% of that value cost could have been spent on restoration, and the work would have got 90% of its value. Let's say a crore work, you sold at 25-30 lakhs now because it had some damage. With a 2-3 lakhs spent on restoration, or even 5 lakhs, you could have got 90 lakh value for it. So you can imagine how much the lack of awareness creates such situations where value is being eroded every day from old collectors. We want to establish, restore that value and empower the collectors to get the right enjoyment of the art through the right aesthetic as well as the value. And that's why we see a great opportunity for everyone to collaborate. Industry may take longer to do it because of conflicts. Collectors should not take it on the hand and do that. Zareen, thank you for such clear explanations. Requesting your feedback on another query. Is it better for an artist to focus on a niche subject topic or create more diverse artwork? That's a subject for discussion in the appreciation session, which is longer, as I said. But very simply put, there are enough cases both ways. You have, I took a Vaikuntha example. One way of looking at it is he's repetitive and it's in the same subject for long, but still the joy of ownership for one collector for one work is very high. And you can find versatile artists who also done extremely well. Let's say Hussain Saab is an example, right? He's done every subject. Horses, this is not his work, but I'm just saying it was again his pet subject, but he's done horse, Mother Teresa to Ganesha to hundreds of other subjects. I think the quality of the artist to grow is not linked only to the subject. It's to the aura of the artist and how the artist builds that aura. That aura, the subject is important, but it's just one plug in the whole aura. What he does with that subject, how does he communicate, or he or somebody else communicates the subject to the market? How does the story connect with the socio-economic landscape? How does the demand supply get managed? There's so many other factors that we think drive value in the long run, that simply a niche or not niche is not important. Signature is important, means the signature style is important to the artist. That's more important. So let's take a Savawala Saab. He's a cubist master. That style of geometric patterns in the background and that human faces with geometric human body, or Yusuf Ali, who's one of our favorite artists, doing a similar manner, is important. Now, whether he does the Parda series, whether he does a moonscape, whether he does a landscape, that's not important. His signature is, moment you see that cubist form, you know it's a Savawala. So I think that the power of Hussein's strokes was the energy in the strokes is what moves you, not the subject. So, so I think that is very important. both, as I said, both, there are enough instances to look at both. Niche artists have also grown, and niche artists have not grown, and artists who are doing a lot of different subjects have also grown. That's a small cog in the wheel of the artist growth. It is the story that the artist communicates and the feel that he creates to a buyer is most important, whatever he does really. But signature style is very powerful. That will always carry a story. What is the Manji Baba signature style? That very plain fluorescent background with a single figure in between, and that fluorescent color. That signature style will be important. Whether it makes an anak out of it, whether it makes a man with a tiger, whether it's a lady, whether it's a goat, that is less important from an enjoyment point of view. It's that feel that you first encounter the work that it gives is most important. Who's the artist or the artwork behind you on the wall is beautiful. It is an artist called Devidas Dharmadhikari. Works are available on our website and you can look at that. Yes, I think we are running out of questions. Also running a bit of time. Yes, I was actually requesting, Rasvin, if you, I don't know if I can also unmute you to actually contribute with your knowledge in this article, in this discussion. Rishina, it's also a pleasure to connect with you, albeit there has been a gap of a number of years since our last meeting. It was extremely gracious for you to mention my article. The presentation today was quite detailed and amazing. I trust. Lovely. I would love it if I could request the participants if you could be unmuted and contribute, because you know your understanding of the subject is again very powerful and or muted us. Great. If any more questions, or should we call it a day?
Beros, vote of thanks, please.
Okay. My name is Beros Daruwala, and it's to thank the speaker of today. Sir, you have brought art alive for all of us. It's like telling a story or getting to know a story at every picture. Apart from that, you've ensured that we always hear the word, there's always science in everything. The science in art is so humongous and so informative. Thank you for bringing that to us today. We really enjoyed it. Today, I think from now onwards, I'm going to look at an art piece and have so many questions and look at it from so many different dimensions. It's all credit due to you. So thank you. Thank you for sparing the time. Thank you for enlightening us. And thank you for such informative way of talking to us and explaining to us. I'd also like to thank Yasri Tantra for being there for us always at all our webinars. Yasri, thank you so much. I'd also like to thank the members of various committees who have attended. And last but not the least, I want to thank you all, the participants, the visitors to this site and the visitors for the webinar. Thank you all. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rishiraj. Thank you very much.
Pleasure was mine.
God bless. God bless. It was a wonderful evening.